Today on Elevate Ordinary, we are revisiting the virtue of humility and the vices to which it is opposed, but particularly we're looking at a powerful prayer that can help us grow and practice this crucial foundational virtue. We'll see you in a moment. Well, welcome back to Elevate Ordinary. I'm your host, JonMarc Grodi.
And I'm Teresa Grodi, his lovely wife.
Yes.
For those of you listening to the audio only.
Yeah, you got to put that in there, yeah. And we're back with another discussion on the ordinary life, the ordinary pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness, as we like to say. And those little aspects of everyday life that God is sending to us, whether we recognize them or not, to grow in holiness, to grow in virtue, to experience His love. We're talking today about humility, but specifically about the Litany of Humility, which is one of our favorite prayers because just we're so humble, and we're not afraid to talk about it. No, I'm just kidding. But it is a powerful prayer, as we'll talk about here in a moment. But before I get to that, I want to remind you that if you like what we're doing here on Awaken Catholic and Elevate Ordinary, please go to awakencatholic.org/donate and become part of the Awaken Nation. Become a partner with us in bringing truth through beauty here through this beautiful Catholic media that the organization is putting together. You can also download the app at the awakenapp.io, which is a great way to follow the content as well as to get more additional content. Particularly if you're a donor, there's a lot of neat stuff in there for you. So check that out. Also download the Hallow app. You can go to hallow.app/awaken. And if you use our link, it supports the ministry and also gives you a free 30-day premium subscription. So check that out. So Teresa, we're back talking about virtue. You always deign to let me talk about my favorite thing, the virtues. I always find a way to sneak them into every conversation. But
it's true. If you've ever started a conversation with a nun by saying, Sister Mary Prudence, my husband loves the virtue you're named after. You might be married to JonMarc.
Thank you for taking one for the team on that one. You sparked up a great conversation. I really appreciated it. Yeah. So we're talking about, again, as we said, the Litany of Humility is a wonderful classic Catholic prayer. We probably have all heard it before, seen it in a prayer book here or there, but it's a really neat prayer. Both because it's about an important virtue, but also because the form of the prayer, as we'll see, the practice of it, the way it's structured, is this great exercise in the virtues. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But you look like you had something to say.
It's an incredible teaching prayer.
Yeah.
It's a prayer that I often use as an examination of conscience, but that the more that you pray it, the more that you learn what these virtues look like or... Anyway, so we should just get into it.
Yeah,
know what we're talking about.
I think. Sorry,
I want to just say here, I have my Pieta prayer book. It's really worn not because I'm very very pious and reading it all the time, but
and even if you were, you wouldn't tell us because of the humility award.
I know the humility award we're giving out during this episode. But because
call
I keep
in to nominate
purse.
yourself. There's the numbers on the bottom of the screen.
But I keep it in my purse, so it gets all beat up with the diapers and the kids and whatever. But this is where I first learned the Litany of Humility. My grandma gave me a Pieta prayer book, and she would sit on dialysis. She was on dialysis for probably 4+ years, which is a long time to be on dialysis. People usually don't. We won't get into that. But she would read through this prayer book back to front. A couple times during each one of her dialysis sessions, a couple times a week. So even before I had my conversion, my adult conversion, I had one of these Pieta prayer books, and I would read through it because it was really important to my grandma, and it was a prayer book, And so I think that a lot of after I did have my conversion, a lot of the teaching was already there. And particularly from this Litany of Humility.
Yeah. And we've talked in the past, there's a previous episode, you can go check it out. We went to a pretty deep dive on pride and sloth, which are these connected vices. And we talked about how humility is is the opposition to both those vices. In fact, I want to just revisit a quote real quick from Peter Kreeft on this, because I think it's really insightful here. He writes, "The opponent of pride is not despair, but humility or poverty of spirit. Pride and despair are twin brothers. They do not exclude each other, but encourage each other. There is a secret pride in despair, a tragic grandeur, an overweening claim unfulfilled. And there is a secret despair at being human in pride's demand to play God. Humility is the opponent of both. It keeps us from despair as well as from pride. The greatest virtue keeps us from the greatest vice." And we talked a lot about how both pride and sloth, or acedia as it's called, are both kind of flights from reality, turning inward to get away from reality that we don't like, that's difficult. And humility is, again, the opposite of both. It's turning back toward reality. It's looking at the reality of who God is and who I am. Mm-hmm. And what's amazing about it, because it's being the opponent of both pride and sloth, or acedia, or despair, whatever you want to call that precise vice there. Humility is the opposite of both. Pride is a false, egotistical self-love, and in humility, in humbling ourselves before God, we're able to find an authentic self-love, to love ourselves as God loves us. Mm-hmm. And despair, the opposite of despair, being humility, we're able to find in humility a holy ambition to be who God called us to be. Not because we're egotistical, but because, no, God has called me, and in obedience to him, I want to be who he's called me to be. So humility is this foundational virtue for our lives. But one of the keys here is that it's a turning to reality. And we're going to go through the Litany of Humility and talk about kind of the three sections in it. But I think with that backdrop in mind of the humility as a turning to reality, and I'm wanting to be whom God calls us to be, and to be the way he calls us to be fully human and integrated, as we often talk about. Mm-hmm. That's what this virtue is all about. So should we go through it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do here, how should we do this? I will do the main part. You do the responses. Okay. We'll do the first section, and then we'll talk about it here.
Yeah, so this litany is divided up into 3 different sections. The first focuses on deliverance from a certain desire. The second focuses on deliverance from a certain type of fear. And then the third part focuses on wanting what's best for other people rather than myself.
And asking for the grace for that desire.
Yeah. So we'll take it section at a time. 3. One of the 3.
So pray along with us, but we'll pause to discuss it a bit. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
O Jesus, meek and humble of heart,
hear me.
From the desire of being esteemed,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being loved,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being extolled,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being honored,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being praised,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being preferred to others,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being consulted,
deliver me, Jesus.
From the desire of being approved,
deliver me, Jesus.
Okay. Now, if you've heard and prayed and loved this prayer before, you're in familiar territory. But some people in the audience may say, "Well, gosh, that is quite harsh." The first section of this prayer.
Yeah. So we're asking Jesus to deliver us from the desire of being esteemed, loved, extolled, honored, praised, preferred, consulted, and approved. The 2 hardest ones for me when I'm praying through this are like the desire of being preferred. I really desire to be preferred. Yeah. And then the desire of being consulted, like kind of think about that one, because that's like you want other people to value your wisdom above everyone else's wisdom and to come to you first about something.
Yeah.
That's one that I really pray from my heart when I pray this, because it's so deeply ingrained in me. Well,
and again, the key here, this is why, again, we started with looking at those vices, because what we notice about all these desires, are any of these desires necessarily, for any of these things, any of these things necessarily bad things? No, they're all good things. Love, to be extolled for good things, I suppose, to be honored, to be praised. Those are not bad things. So the issue here, what we're we're praying to be delivered from is the vices, the rooted vices underneath, where it's not the fact that I receive love that's a bad thing. It's the fact that in my relationships, I am the center of gravity. My desires and my relationship with others, all those things happen in relation to me. I evaluate a situation by how it affects me. I evaluate a desire by how it affects me. I evaluate a person, an event, by how it affects me. We want to grow in people who receive God's gifts and give him praise and glory when he gives us good gifts or when good things happen to us. We want to be thankful and grateful. But we recognize that the issue is that we all have a deep-rooted attachment to self rather than to God and to others. And so what we're being asking to be delivered from here is from this deep. We need surgery. Surgery needs to be done here because I, at my core, am still deeply attached to myself first, and that conditions everything else I do or think.
Yeah. And it helps to give it a name too. Because I think sometimes we evaluate situations in impressions. Yeah. Like, oh, am I feeling nasty towards this person? Or am I feeling? But if I were to be like, yeah, am I desiring that this person went to me first and not to that other friend? Like, does that kind of like make me mad when I'm like, why didn't she text me first when she knows that this is something I've struggled with? Why didn't she come and ask me for advice? It's like, it gives it a name. Oh, I want to be consulted. I want to be approved. I want people to think that my wisdom is the best. And in that way, in a very practical way, it helps me in future situations. Like the more I learn this list and commit it to memory in future situations, being like, okay, where's my desire? Yeah. Is my desire for this person to really, really get advice that's going to help them from the right person through the Holy Spirit? Or is my desire to be the one that everybody comes to? Yeah. It's all about turning outward. It's interesting to think about this prayer and then think about that, is it the prayer of St. Francis or the, Master, grant that I may not so much seek to console as to, be consoled as to console, to love, to be loved as to love. That's kind of what's going on here. In fact, we could replace many of the things mentioned in that prayer in here, like not so much to be extolled, but to extol. Like I want to turn outward and focus on the good of the other person, that relationship. You can't, to the degree that I remain attached to myself, I am to that degree always cut off from a perfect relationship with God and other people because I'm always getting in my way. I remember I was talking to this friend who was planning to go to the seminary. And I remember saying to him, like, you're probably going to be made Pope someday, And he was like, he took the comment and was like, no, don't say that. But then he was like, it's probably just as good for you to have said the comment as it is for me to have truly not wanted to receive it. And like that particular distinction has stuck with me for over a decade, is that it is good for me to praise another person if I really see God working in them, just as much as it is good for them to ask themselves, how am I receiving this? Or something like that. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. So loved, extolled, honored, praised, these are all good things. But if our desire, the desires that we have, this section is really focusing on temperance in a sense. We have these desires, they're desires for good things, but they need to be tempered. And also, especially if these desires are rooted in an attachment to self, an underlying pride, if we have an intemperance in these desires that comes out of a deep down attachment to self, that's that. Throughout the course of our life, that's that sin that we're asking God to slowly, release us from. Take away my attachment to myself so that I can simply desire the good of others and receive with joy and with gratitude and humility whatever you send me, Lord. Right? Yeah. So that's that first section. Let's go on to the next one. The response in this next section is also deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being humiliated. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being despised. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of suffering rebukes. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being calumniated. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being forgotten. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being ridiculed. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being wronged. Deliver me, Jesus. From the fear of being suspected. Deliver me, Jesus. Yeah.
So the last section was really focusing on temperance. This section, very obviously, is focusing on the virtue of courage. And once again, all these things that are listed are actual evils. Christianity is never about denying reality. It's never about pretending, oh, everything's fine. Like there's nothing bad ever happens to me. Life is no. We're not about denial of reality. And in reality, like there's crap in the world. Stuff happens. And all these things listed are things that hurt us. They are evils when they happen. So what's the issue here? The real issue is the fear, what happens, what the virtues and vices in us that condition how those evils impact us. We had an episode about the virtue of patience, and patience really is this virtue of whatever evils I'm experiencing, whatever frustration, whatever difficulties, that I do not allow that to enter in and steal my peace. The Lord, I know God, I trust God, I've received, a peace from Him, and I don't ever have to give that up. Whenever that leaves me, it's because I've given it up. I've given it into anger or to fear or to whatever that is. And so this section is all about, deliver me from these fears, not necessarily deliver me from these things, deliver me from the fear of these things. Allow me to endure them, to persevere in the midst of them, and to hopefully to offer them up, to unite them with Christ.
This is, for me now, this is a particular, and probably for a lot of us, a particularly timely section to ask for to name these things and to ask for Jesus's deliverance from the fear, because I feel a lot like I'm in a situation where I can't even ask honest, curious questions about the world without possibly being attacked from one side or another, or canceled, or someone's going to come after me, or I'm going to lose friends or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm a historian, I'm a research historian. All I want to do is ask questions and get to the bottom of things and the truth. And I've found myself lately just being afraid of letting anyone know questions I have about common things that are occurring in the world,
yeah.
And I have been lacking in courage. Just really lacking in courage. And I had just resolved this morning that I'm going to work a lot harder, which, obviously means that I'm going to have to ask Jesus for a lot more grace. But to just work at not being afraid of the attacks that may come to me from simply just asking questions,
and we had another episode recently on the fear of God. And I can't remember the quote we read there, but it might have been Chesterton, but pointing out that a holy fear of God casts out all other fear. If I fear God, which means that I regard Him as He is, I'm under no illusion about who God is and who I am, and I have that holy fear which is right to that relationship, then to the degree that I have that, all other fear dissipates. And what's interesting about this section in here is that on the one hand, all these things, these fears, are for things that we would commonly associate with being opposed to humility. So, humiliated, despised, rebukes. We're thinking of those in terms of pride and vanity, things that prick us, things that offend us, things that humiliate us. But we really could extend this list to all the fears that we have in our life, because, again, in a certain respect, all fear is connected to an underlying pride or despair. That underlying pride or sloth. We don't really turn and grapple with the reality that God is God and He has made me and I'm His. Because to the degree that we grapple with that, what have we to fear? My fear or my anxiety always has a me in it. When I'm afraid, when I'm worried about something, when my kids are stressing me out, or the job, or something, whatever, there's a part of me under that all that's thinking about how this impacts me, my image, my desire, my plan, whenever we're looking past that to God or to another person, and again, whenever we're we have the gaze of charity, when we're really looking at the other person, those fears kind of melt away. When our concern is for the other person, those fears are greatest, and they hold us most enthralled when we're, whether we consciously realize it or not, we're holding on to ourselves.
Yeah. My spiritual director was just telling me the other day that he wanted me to ask the question more, not how is someone seeing me, but who am I hurting by this action? So to take what you're saying, like to take the situation instead of being like, how am I being perceived?
Yeah.
You know, when I respond to this, to like, what relationship am I damaging at this moment? Like turning inward or looking at myself.
Yeah. All right. Again, there's just a lot of challenging stuff there. Let's move on to the last section. So again, the first section was asking the Lord to deliver us from desires that are rooted in an egotism, you know, a pride, an underlying pride. And the second section was about deliver us from these fears that, again, that they're also rooted in our pride. They're not rooted in humility and love of God. Well, then this third section is really fascinating, because then asking to be delivered from those things, what we want then is, Lord, replace them with something. Mm-hmm. Temperance is not about tempering our desires and leaving it there. It's not a merely negative virtue. It's about, no, I temper these, I purify my heart so it can be filled with something. Mm-hmm. So let's go on to the next section. And the response here, for those who are following along, watching or listening, is, Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it, that others may be loved more than I.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that others may be esteemed more than I.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that in the opinion of the world, others may increase and I may decrease.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that others may be chosen and I set aside.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that others may be praised and I unnoticed.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that others may be preferred to me in everything.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it,
that others may become holier than I, provided that I may become as holy as I should.
Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it.
Amen.
That others may become holier than I,
provided
that I may become as holy as I should. That one's a real paradigm shifter, right? Yeah. You know, because you want to be a saint, and we're all called to be saints. Mm-hmm. But just imagining maybe even like the person that you've discipled, mm-hmm. you know, your child or whatever. I mean, we see this in history, this certain situation where the child begins to rise and the parent becomes vengeful and jealous, you know, and that's a scary thought, mm-hmm. you know, and it makes you want to be delivered from.
Well, it points out why we need these delicate instruments of these kinds of the virtues and vices as concepts, and prayers like this, because again, you realize at points in your spiritual life when you thought you were a pretty good person and you're doing pretty well, something happens to make you realize, oh wait, I love being Catholic because it makes me, in my mind, look cool or someone to be looked up to. Mm-hmm. Oh, I wanted to be holy and be a saint for me. Mm-hmm. And that's why when other people are doing well, doing good, people that should be admired, that feels like a threat to me. Mm-hmm. We realize, oh, dear Lord, and that is meant as a prayer here. I am still, after all this, I still, in a sense, worship myself. I'm still the center of my own universe. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need prayers like this where we're asking, Lord, get down there deep, please. And, save me from me, mm-hmm. And so all the things in that last litany there, we this is desire to turn outward and not just to not desire the bad things, but give me the desire, these charitable desires, to really desire the good of the other, mm-hmm. even at my own expense, mm-hmm. To desire their good first. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That they may increase and I may decrease. Yeah. That prayer, is that John the Baptist? Yeah, that's John the Baptist prayer. Yeah. But I do love that end part, as you pointed out here, that last line, that others may become holier than I, provided that I may become as holy as I should. Again, it's so funny here, the layers here. Mm-hmm. So you may, I want others to become holier than I. Yes, I want that. Okay. Well, now I want to be as low as possible. No, the whole point here is it's not about what I want. Mm-hmm. I think it was Lewis who famously said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. The point is, my ego stops being the reference point for all the good and evil of the world. Mm-hmm. I'm not the reference point. I turn outward and say, no, Lord, you are the reference point. You are the measure of what is good. It is your will that I want done. And I know you want that person to be holy. And so I pray for that. And I want to be precisely what you have created and called me to be. Another quote by Peter Kreeft that connects here, again, points this out. High and holy ambition to be a saint is not opposed to holy humility, total reliance on God's grace. Exactly the opposite. Ambition without humility is ambition that fails. It is pride which goes before a fall. Humility without ambition is false humility. In fact, it too is pride, for it rebels against God's command to strive for the upward call of God. Humility is the antidote to both pride and sloth, because it says, no, Lord, thy will be done. Yeah.
For some reason, I've read Pride and Prejudice like 9 or 10 times. And for some reason, as we're going through this litany of humility, I keep thinking of Bingley. Okay, like redheaded Bingley who marries Sweet Jane, like the absolute good. They're good. Both people are good. But there's this point where Darcy points out that Bingley practiced false modesty by making light of himself as someone who, I write and I leave out words because I can't, go fast enough, and I'm just always in a hurry to move off and like to go to the next thing that's interesting to me. And Darcy points out that like, you're kind of smug in it. You like that you're a person that moves quickly because you think your thoughts are so rapid that they just can't be contained by, whatever. And I don't know why I'm thinking of this while we're doing the Litany of Humility. It's hard to do an episode on humility because I'm thinking through all my words as I'm saying these things. I'm like, am I being really prideful? Like, am I practicing false humility as we're going through these things?
Yeah, well, we all always are, which is why no one ever actually wins the humility award. That's also a little bit why this prayer, it may seem, and perhaps I think there's some reason to it, why this may seem like you're bending a little far in the other direction to kind of bring it back to the middle, of this place of humility, because it does seem like a rather extreme prayer. But I think we begin to realize as we dig into it, we dig into the concepts of humility and pride, we recognize that there's an onion here. There's layers, and you think you've made progress, and then you find some new way in which, no, I'm still the center of my universe. I still evaluate everything by a deeper desire for myself. And so again, that's why we keep praying. We keep availing ourselves of God's mercy and the sacraments,
Yeah, this it reminds me of a couple episodes back when Leah Darrow was on and we were talking about The Office, and she said that she noticed that like the character that really just gets you the most, that you kind of hate the most, is the one that like is revealing to you yourself. And I was thinking about this with the Litany of Humility, like the first time you read this, you find the flaws in the author. You're like, this one shouldn't be in there. This is just, this one's ridiculous.
He doesn't understand.
Yeah, this is wrong.
How?
This is heresy.
It's so hard for me.
No. Or just like, he's wrong because this is good. That's exactly the one that God is calling you to examine and to pray about in your own life. I mean, I would really encourage you to perhaps attempt, a couple times to use this as an examination of conscience. And bring what you recognize when you're reading through this to confession. I always think, even if something isn't like a sin, I like to bring things that really bother and fester with me to the light of the confessional, because it is real. It is real where we're going and what the grace that is availed to us, and the fact that the devil cannot stand in the face of confession. Well, another point connected to that is this is one of the reasons why we've talked so much about the virtues, and we continue to use that as a framework to fit in a lot of these discussions, because what they do is they broaden our sense of what we might bring to the confessional. We tend to go to the confessional and only think of kind of the end run, perfectly packaged, fits in the 10 Commandment sins. But we don't think of, what about all those desires I recognize in myself that are rooted in a love of myself? Like to simply, how do you confess pride? I was prideful all the time. That's frequently my confession.
This gives you such a great, to recognize, all these desires, these untempered and selfish, prideful desires, I bring those to the light. Say, Lord, deliver me from these. I have all these fears of real evils, but the fear itself, that is a character flaw. That's a weakness that, Lord, I need your grace to be courageous, to be able to conquer this fear. And so it does expand very widely what we can bring to God's mercy and avail ourselves of his mercy. Yeah.
I love confession.
Yeah, I love confession too. Yeah, Lucy's going to confession. We got
our
kids getting ready for sacraments
have her first
soon.
Confession soon.
Exciting time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you for joining us again for this conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, consider becoming a partner with us in Awaken Catholic by joining the Awaken Nation. Go to awakencatholic.org/donate to be a supporter of this mission of bringing truth through beauty, through beautiful media. And also download the app at the awakenapp.io. That's the best way to follow the content, as well as the other neat stuff that the organization is putting out. And if you are a supporter, there's some exclusive stuff there as well. We also would invite you to download the Hallow app. And I will say that the Litany of Humility is in the Hallow app, and it's a great way to pray that prayer. You know, the reader will read it through and allow you to do the responses, and then give you some time to just kind of sit and maybe examine your conscience with it. It's a great prayer, a great reflection. And if you download the Hallow app through our link at hallow.app/awaken, you'll get a 30-day free premium subscription to the app, and that also supports our ministry if you go through our link. So we really appreciate that as well. So once again, thank you for joining us for this conversation about the ordinary pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. We hope you'll join us again next week. God bless.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.